So you bought the house and you're in the inspection period. What comes next? This is Ron Wysocarski at Wise Home Team Realty, and the inspection periods are getting a little crazy right now. Here's what I mean. When we have a property that's been in an investment portfolio as a rental, the owner of the property has not likely lived in the property and therefore may not know every last little thing that may or may not be, right with the property. And when they fill out their seller's disclosure, it's asking what they know is wrong with the property, or you disclose any known defects or maybe even some of the good points about it. What's interesting is that if you've never lived in a property, and maybe you bought it a long time ago, maybe without an inspection, you may not know anything. And if that's the case, the seller's disclosure could very well say nothing, 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 don't know. That happens sometimes. We have some people that just say they sign an affidavit that says there's actually no seller's disclosure. We've never lived in the property. And that's legit. That can happen. What we run into is that some of the homes could be remodeled or painted or cleaned up and look pretty nice, not knowing what's below the surface. And again, if you just bought a property and you chose to change some paint colors and maybe change out some cabinets or, make it look a little nicer, may not know what's underneath if you're not looking at it. So let's suppose that you've got pier and beam construction where the house is built up off the ground. There's a crawl space maybe this big underneath it. Maybe you've never been in there underneath it as a homeowner. What could you possibly know? If there's no inspection, what could possibly go wrong down there? Well, there's drain lines that run underneath the house. There could be a leak with those. There's bathrooms, so there's waste lines. If one of those are cracked, well, that could get a little messy, and you wouldn't know that. If there are termites underneath there, or maybe the flooring in the bathrooms in a moisture area or a tub, well, maybe that's compromised as well. And as a homeowner, you may not know any of these things. When's the last time you've been underneath your house? Or for that matter, what about the roof? Very few of us actually climb up on our own roof to really go up there and do a good inspection to see if there's any shingles missing, or if there's any holes. Up in your attic, are you checking everywhere to look for any evidence of termites or moisture up there? You see, you're probably not. And that's where the changes come in. Some of the houses, they look great. They're clean, they're painted, they're decorated, they're staged, they look awesome. But looking underneath the property or above the property or in the attic is something that most homeowners simply don't do. So it's not a matter of a seller not being truthful or honest every time. Now, perhaps there's a seller out there that doesn't disclose something, omission, if you know it. That's not really an excuse over here. But you can legitimately not know it. And let's face it, unless you got x-ray vision, you can't see in the walls. What we run into is when the inspection is done, these items come to the forefront. And let's just suppose that you had a house that looked great, but you actually had plumbing leaks underneath the house. And there could be raw sewage underneath there. It's almost like it happened in one of our inspections recently, hasn't it? You could find out that the air conditioner that works really, really well and it keeps the house cool. It could be 30 or 40 years old when the useful lifespan is predicted to be 10 or 12 years. Some things last. Those items, if the item said, hey, if all they said was, well, the AC, you walk in and it's cold and it's been working the whole time we've owned it for a few years and we haven't really had any plumbing problems that we're aware of, well, sure, because the leak was underneath the house. Unless you're crawling underneath it, you just wouldn't likely know. So when these things come up, that might trigger a renegotiation. It's fair enough for the buyer to say, look, I trust you. I take it your word you didn't know these things, but now that I've done the inspection and spent a lot of money on it, they've been identified. And now one of two things is going to happen. The buyer and seller will come to some sort of an arrangement, whether the seller makes other repairs or the buyer agrees to take a credit or maybe something in between where they each share in their responsibility. There's certainly a way to work that out. But there could be a cancellation of contract too. And if that's the case, if you're the seller, you may not have known before, but if you've seen that report and you've been told what's actually wrong with the property, you likely have to disclose that to the next buyer. And this is why a lot of deals actually come back together. Rather than disclose it to every other buyer, and let's face it, the next buyer comes in, is going to do a home inspection, you would think. They're going to find the same things. So most sellers are realizing that, if they didn't know before, they know it now. For many, it's better to make some sort of concession or negotiation or repair or replacement, knowing that they're not going to be able to bypass on the next inspection. And if you're a buyer in this situation, you do have the right to ask for those things to be repaired. It's not a second round of negotiations or a second bite at the apple. If it wasn't disclosed and it shows up in a report, it's certainly a conversation. Now, where does this leave most sales? Most sales get worked out. And it doesn't always lean towards the buyer or the seller. It's usually a conversation of compromise. And that's the beginning to the solution. It's a conversation that leads to a win-win where both sides feel good that they can proceed. I hope this helps you out just a little bit about what's going on with the inspections. And by the way, it doesn't have to be accusatory. We don't say, you knew this and you didn't disclose it and you hid it. I think we've all had something in our life where we didn't realize it. And if we'd have known, we would have mentioned it. We simply didn't realize it. It's what you do after the fact. And that's what's happening right now. I see a lot of actually a spirit of a conversation that's leading to good results to get these deals done. So if you enjoyed the content, please give us a like below. If you haven't subscribed, please do. And definitely drop us a line if you have questions or comments about other topics you'd like to hear about. This is Ron Wysocarski at Wise Home Team Realty.